Inner Chaos by Grevin Hades. Chapter 9. Skin. Twilight watched Grevin begin to fiddle with the straps holding the gauntlet to his arm with great anticipation. She wanted to take in every detail so she could make the most complete set of notes she could. Her eyes grew wide as the first gauntlet fell to the ground with a soft thud, drawing her gaze to his fingers, which quickly moved to the other gauntlet in a well-practiced manner. She didn't blink as the firelight gave brief glimpses of his skin tone in the evening light. Within moments, the second gauntlet fell, joining its twin on the ground at his feet. She watched as he rolled the sleeves of the shirt on the bed, his forearms, and sat back, letting his arms rest on his knees, his palms pointed upwards, allowing all the ponies to see. Well, this is a stop. Please, give me a few moments to get used to this. I don't exactly show my face to every single person. Pony, Biggie said, peering over her shoulder before grinning and popping back over to where she had been sitting before. Twilight couldn't help but smile at her friend's antics, but soon stopped when the firelight washed over his exposed skin, showing her part of what he looked like. His forearms and hands looked strong and lean, with toned muscles, and his skin lightly tanned, and he had a few small scars in some places, and though they seemed aged, there was a pair of them that made her pause. Beginning from his wrists on both of his arms was a medium scar running down the middle, stopping just before his elbows. She slowly raised a hoof, about to ask a question, when he pulled his arms back and raised them to the edges of his hood, taking the fabric into his light grip. Grevin sighed as he slowly rose to his feet as he pulled the fabric of his hood back, allowing the warm glow of the fire to wash his skin and light. The main six all rose to their feet, some stepping closer, their anticipation clearly showing on their faces. As he lowered his hands, they could see everything except for his eyes, which remained closed. His hair was medium length, stopping just below his ears, his color a very dark brown, if not black, and it was unkempt and somewhat wild looking. His face had a strong, smooth jawline, lean and toned, leading into a somewhat muscled neck. His skin was smooth and tanned as well, showing a small amount of stubble running along his jaw, but there was one flaw. Beginning from the base of his left eye and running down the middle of his left cheek was a thin, aged scar, clearly made from the work of a blade. Twilight felt her face heat up slightly as she looked up at him, taking in his features. With his hood down and cloak pushed back some, she could see how broad his shoulders were, as well as how well his armor fit him, putting most of the palace scars to shame. She focused more on his face, something caught her attention.
Grevin, your eyes are still closed. Are you alright?
Applejack moved around to Grevin's front and joined her friends in taking in his features, her own cheeks taking on a slight red hue of their own. Upon hearing Twilight ask her question, she turned her head and found that the other ponies had similar looks on their faces as she did, a slight furrowing of her brow before turning her gaze back to her new friend. Easy does it, every pony. Just give one a moment to get comfortable. She moved closer and reached up, placing a hoof on his shoulder. Take your time, Sugar Cube. We're not going to judge you. Grevin nodded once more before taking a steady breath, and then opening his eyes, resulting in a small collective gasp from the main six. The six ponies didn't dare blink as they took in what they saw, a pair of red eyes staring back at them. While many times eyes such as those would mean that the one who held them were evil, his eyes were different. They held no malice, no hate, but instead held a look of concern and a hint of sadness. All in all, he looked quite exotic and strong, if not mysterious and fearsome. What he saw when his eyes adjusted to the dim firelight surprised him, to say the least. The six ponies were standing there silently with wide eyes, slightly open jaws, and some had hints of chit red adorning their cheeks. His eyes darted to each pony, his breath coming in slow, steady breaths in an attempt to calm himself. The only sound that filled the air was the pop and crack of a large campfire. The silence was deafening, and it worried him. Perhaps this was a mistake, Perhaps she should try to escape before they should become afraid of him. He took a small step back as his hand instinctively reached for his hood to pull it back up when he saw Twilight step forward and raise her hoof, placing it on his hand.
No, it's okay, Greven.
He pulled back a bit, a look of surprise washing over his features. You're not frightened of me? Verity blinked and shook her head as she stepped forward.
Why would we be frightened of you, dear?
He looked down a moment as he allowed his hands to drop once again. Where I come from, anything that is different tends to be looked down upon and hated, especially when they tend to look and have abilities as I do. Pinkie Pie snorted out a small giggle.
Well, that's silly. We don't see anything evil. We just see you.
He shook his head as he knelt down and rested an arm on his knee. I don't think you understand. Where I come from, I am far from normal. I may have the basic appearance of an average human, but I'm not. I'm stronger, faster than an average human. Also, my magic is different than what most people can use. Then there are my eyes, all of which makes me appear monstrous, and combine that with my physical appearance and how imposing I can be, even when just standing in place, doing nothing. It makes for something that people love to hate. So you'll have to forgive me when I have a hard time believing that you can just say you can see past all that so easily. This got Twilight's attention. Human, she had heard that term before back in Canterlot. She raised a hoof to her chin and thought, and after a few moments her eyes widened as it hit her. Humans, they were creatures of myth and legend, only mentioned in a few rare texts in the Canterlot archives. She would have to ask him about this later. Rainbow Dash snorted and flew over the fire, a frown on her face as she moved so she could look directly into Greven's eyes.
You think we would let something like that make us think differently of you? Are you expecting us to be afraid of you? To hate you? That's not cool.
Applejack nodded.
That's right. You've already proven that you mean us no harm, so stop thinking like we're gonna hate you, because it's not gonna happen.
She smiled as she sat down before him.
And don't you worry about the folk in Ponyville. We'll make sure the pony folk give you a fair shake when they meet you.
Greven slowly nodded in a hesitant acceptance as he allowed himself to relax and sit back, while still facing his friends. Very well, I appreciate that, and I'll do my best to relax around you 6 more. However, when in town, if I ever go to town, I would still prefer to keep my hood on, at least for the time being. This will take some getting used to. Fluttershy smiled as she sat down beside Applejack.
It's alright, we'll help you out however we can. Can I ask a question now, if that's okay?
Her wide sad eyes shimmered as she looked from side to side. He simply nodded as he shifted his weight so that he sat back and was able to rest both his arms on his knees, palms upward. All right, ask away. I'll try my best to answer your questions. She looked down and lightly pawed the ground.
Well, I was wondering what you were doing out here in the forest every night.
He grit his teeth and averted his gaze. I was training. You know, relaxing. Brady frowned.
Relaxing? Darling, that hardly seems like relaxing to me. A good massage and spa treatment, now that's relaxing.
She looked at her green-eyed friend.
Applejack, what kind of work are you putting him through?
Applejack shook her head. I know that working in the orchard is a hard day's work. She turned her gaze back to him, a look of worry adorning her face, her ears drooping a bit, and her eyes widening in a gaze that could only be named a puppy dog look. Is it that stressful for you? He looked away once more, mostly due to him wishing to avoid the issue, but also because he would be helpless against that face. No, it's not stressful at all. I find it refreshing, to be honest. Rainbow Dash narrowed her eyes and grit her teeth as she landed next to him.
Then why do you need to relax if you already find it refreshing to work in the orchard? You're looking tense, Greven.
Applejack sighed and walked over to him, placing a hook on his arm, a small smile on her face. Graven, I'm the holder of the element of honesty. I'm gonna know when you lie, so why not be honest with us? Please? Twilight nodded as she moved to sit next to her friend.
She's right. So, are you going to tell us what you're really stressed about?
He sighed, allowing his head to fall on the feet, but not before pulling his arm back. The contact making him feel a bit uncomfortable, which caused Applejack to frown but say nothing. All right, if you must know, what I was doing is part of a training routine I have. And it does help me with stress, but it's nothing to do with working in the orchard. He raised his head and brought his narrowed gaze to meet the main six's. It has everything to do with what I was doing before I came here. He looked up to the sky, collecting his thoughts for a brief moment before taking another slow breath. Before I came here, I was on a very important quest to save my homeland, Bastion. Due to my unique heritage, I was the only one who could put a stop to an ancient, vanished army from being released from their prison to rain terror, chaos, and suffering over the land. I was on my way to the gate of their prison, hoping to get there before the one who was trying to free them, hoping to set up some sort of ambush. As I was traveling through the mountains, a vast and powerful vortex opened up, and despite my efforts to fight it, it pulled me through. The next thing I knew, I was in the orchard, my entire body aching. I didn't have long to get my bearings because I saw that clubhouse on fire. And, well, the rest is history. From our first meeting, I remember waking up and you telling me I'd been in a coma for 3 weeks. Twilight frowned, her eyes softening.
So I'm guessing that in that time frame, the one you were trying to stop could have succeeded in their task, unleashing all that chaos and evil across your homeland.
Oh, Graven. He slowly nodded his head, his eyes distant, his face somber. It's a terrible thing, but sadly there's nothing I can do now except hope for the people of the various kingdoms there to come together and meet the threat with as much courage and strength as they can. I can no longer fulfill my purpose, and there's nothing else I can do from here. Merdy stepped forward with a sad look in her eyes.
Darling, we had no idea. We know what it feels like to be the last hope for the land. Is there anything we can do?
He shook his head. You all have already done quite a bit for me, and there's nothing more I could or would ask of you. I come out here to try and clear my mind of the concern through my training. Fluttershy stepped forward, placing her face directly in front of his and a hoof on each other's shoulders. Her cyan eyes filled with sadness. She stared into his. Griffin froze at the touch, his shoulders tensing visibly before trying to pull back, only to have her lean in and begin to pull him back. She lunged forward, resting her chin on his left shoulder, her hose wrapping around him in a tight, warm hug.
You blame yourself, don't you? It's not your fault, Griffin. You can't blame yourself.
He felt himself tense for 2 reasons. First and foremost, the warm hug he was receiving which caused a lump to form in his throat. And second, he wasn't accustomed to physical contact, except for when he was in a fight, of course. And the warmth she gave off was making him feel uncomfortably relaxed. I don't blame myself, Fluttershy, but thank you. To be honest with him, so he did feel a little bit better than before. She pulled back and nodded, a small smile on her face.
You're welcome.
She turned to her friends, only to let out a small squeak when she saw frowns on Twilight and Applejack's faces. Applejack ignored the sheepish look on Fluttershy's face and turned to look at Crab. She's right. You can't blame yourself. He frowned. I don't. This caused Applejack to frown, her green eyes showing her concern. The frown caught Twilight's attention, who followed the orange mare's lead.
You did all you could.
He narrowed his eyes and began to move to his feet. I told you, I don't blame myself. Rainbow Dash rose to meet her, her magenta eyes looking into his red ones.
They're right. You shouldn't place any blame on yourself.
Griffin felt a slight growl escape his throat as a familiar feeling of anger, shame, and frustration. Sadness began to return from the pit of his stomach and began to rise through a small bit of wetness in his eyes. I told you already, I don't blame myself. Now can we please change the subject? Rarity moved over and looked up at him as Pinky did the same on his other side, and both moved on their hind legs and gave him a brief group hug. Darling, you shouldn't put this squarely on your shoulders. Righty, you did all you could. Grevin pulled back violently as his frustration, his anger, his sadness overwhelmed him, nearly knocking the other two ponies to the ground. He turned his back and took a few steps away, putting some distance between the ponies and himself. His hands balled into fists, his shoulders heaving with each breath. Stop saying that! I did nothing, fucking nothing! Every time I fought, I failed to stop them. No matter who helped me, no matter what the attacks I threw their way, nothing could help. No matter how careful I was, I couldn't do what I was meant to do and protect the people of Bastion, and now they are at the mercy of an evil, monstrous, unstoppable force. He drew back a fist and drove it into the apple tree, causing several apples to fall prematurely to the ground. It was my responsibility. If I had just hung on for a bit longer on that cliff edge, if I'd been stronger, faster or smarter than all those people, women, children, innocent villagers, all of them would be safe, but now their blood is on my hands. He shuddered as he pulled his hand back and leaned forward, resting his head on the tree he'd just splintered, his breathing coming in slow, deep breaths. His eyes closed, his focus now on trying to get himself back under control. For several minutes there was silence, except for the sound of the crackling fire, crickets, and his heavy breathing. The main six stood in sad silence as they watched their friend grieve in his own way. The pure emotion in his voice had shook them to their very core. The violent hit the tree took scared most of them, but after a few minutes, both Twilight and Applejack began to step forward, both locking eyes with one another, a simple nod, the only communication they needed between them. Twilight approached him on his right and Applejack on his left. They paused for a moment as they heard him quietly scold himself. Damn it, Grevin. Get it together. They don't need to know problems. They really don't need to be frightened by you. Applejack had heard enough. She trotted over and sat herself beside him soon, followed by Twilight on his opposite side. Grevin, you're not giving us your problems, and you're not frightening us. You just need to open up, Sugar Cube. It's alright. We're your friends. Twilight nodded and placed a soft hook on his arm, which she didn't pull back from. Grevin, we are all sorry about what had happened, but we're also thankful to have you here. If it wasn't for you, Apple Bloom, Sweetie Belle, and Scootaloo would have died. I know that Rarity, Rainbow Dash, and Applejack are eternally grateful to you for that. You've been here for a very short time, and you already helped so much. You shouldn't forget that. He quietly nodded and took a slow, shaky breath. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to lose my temper like that. I didn't mean to scare anyone. Pinky's voice cut him off with a small giggle. Pony! She then quickly rolled her eyes and mumbled. I wish the author would get it right. Rarity paused and looked at her, a look of confusion on her face, while the pink pony resumed her usual silly nature. Griffin paused for a moment before a small smile washed across his face. The simple interjection from the pink pony, as well as her mirthful giggle, was enough to push his sadness away and make way for a slight chuckle to rise from his chest. He nodded and turned, facing the others as he brushed his hands over his eyes, wiping away the remaining wetness from them. He looked at Twilight and Applejack, who backed away from him a bit, their bright eyes looking hopefully at him. Thank you. I'll try to be better about opening up to my friends when I need to. He then began walking back towards the campfire, and the other ponies who made room for him. I'm sorry if I frightened you. I'm used to keeping things bottled up tight, and I guess my emotions finally got the better of me. Rarity shook her head. Darling, it's never healthy to do something like that. It'll ruin your complexion and give you grey hairs. Though if that happens, I know a perfect salon that can help with that. He shook his head and sat down once more by the fire, his nerves finally calm once more, and for the first time since he arrived there, he felt relaxed. That's quite all right. I think I'd probably scare the stylist. The other ponies laughed a bit as they joined him, and they once again began to roast marshmallows, though this time they all sat closer to him than before, all of them sharing stories of their adventures involving Nightmare Moon, Gilda, Rayburn, and the Buffalo in Appaloosa, the cider-making car, whatever that was, and even a mystery on a train involving something called an The lives of these ponies were simply amazing. They had been through so much together, and despite their differences and the occasional falter, they were as loyal to one another as they could be. He doubted that anything could break up their friendship with one another, which was something he envied. In Bastion he had friends, but he didn't trust anyone as far as he could throw them. But here, well, it was different. He glanced to his side and noticed that Applejack had laid down on her stomach and was beginning to look rather sleepy, her tired eyes still smiling at the antics of Pinky and Rainbow across the campfire. Looking to his left, he saw that Twilight was in a similar position, with a small book in front of her. From what he knew, he doubted that this was abnormal for her. His thoughts were interrupted by Rarity, who had trotted over and begun to inspect his cloak. "Can I help you with anything, Rarity?" She smiled and nodded. "Quite. I'm curious about this cloak of yours. How can this simple piece of cloth be so effective at hiding your face?" He reached down next to her and lightly ran his fingertips over the old fabric. "Well, to be honest with you, there's magic in it." Twilight's ears perked up as she heard this, and she turned her head to face him. "Did you say there's magic in the cloth?" He nodded once again. "Yes, this cloth was given to me by someone I would consider to be an uncle. He knew what I would go through with my features. He had this cloth enchanted with a shadow spell that keeps my face hidden as long as the hood is up. A nice side effect of the spell is that I can blend into shadows a bit easier than before as well." Twilight smiled as she moved to her hooves and came over to inspect the cloth with Rarity, her horn lighting up with a soft glow. "That's amazing. Rarity, do you think you could try to do something this with your creation sometime? It would be a great experiment. Nothing like this has ever been done in Equestria before." Rarity grinned, letting out a small laugh. "Oh, absolutely. The applications could be endless. This could change the fashion industry." Her horn lit up, taking a small corner of the cloak and floating it up to her eyes so she could get a better look at it. "Well, this certainly isn't a cotton blend." Twilight watched Rarity work, but then allowed her eyes to wander to Grevin for a bit, while he spoke to her about the material she was looking at. She took a closer look at his shoulders and allowed her eyes to move down his arm, her eyes widening at how deceiving they looked. Sure, he was muscular, but she would have never guessed that he could do what he did to that tree earlier. She allowed her eyes to travel further down until they caught sight of his forearms, specifically the lower portion. She had seen the particular scars earlier, but now that things had settled down, her curiosity was beginning to get to her. Why did he have them? Was it from helping someone like he did Fluttershy? Applejack had turned her attention from her prankster friends to the three next to her, and was surprised to see that Grevin and Rarity spoke. Twilight was leaning into his arm with a curious look on her face. She raised her head and adjusted her Stetson for a moment before speaking. "Twa, what are you looking at?" Twilight snapped her head back and blushed a little bit as everyone's attention was pulled to her. She cleared her throat and brushed her mane away from her eyes. "Well, I was just curious about something I noticed." Grevin sat back a bit. "All right, I did say I would do my best to answer questions. So, what's on your mind?" She sat up and cleared her throat. "Well, I was wondering, do you take on wounds from the ones you heal?" His hands instinctively went to his abdomen, where the most recent wound of his was, earned when he healed Fluttershy. "Sometimes." Twilight reached her hoof out and gently grasped his arm, and slowly turned it so that the scar running along his wrist and down the middle of his lower forearm could be seen in the dim firelight. "Well, you have the scar like this one on both arms. I was wondering what kind of wound you healed to receive those." Grevin frowned, his eyes darkening as he pulled his arm back, letting it be tucked back into his cloak. I didn't." This caused a confused look to cross over her face as she watched him avert his eyes to stare at the ground between his feet. "What? Were you born with them?" He shook his head once more, and a frown pursed his lips. "No." Applejack quirked one eyebrow into the air. "Well, where'd it come from, Sugar Cube?" He sighed and closed his eyes as he raised a a hand to lightly rub the bridge of his nose. I don't think you want to know. The main six all stood up, their curiosity getting the better of them, but no one said a word until Applejack nodded her head. I do. The others nodded their heads in agreement, causing his frown to deepen, and he spoke in a quiet whisper. Damn it. He raised his gaze to meet theirs. Are you certain you wish to hear this? Rainbow Dash slammed one of her hooves into the other, a look of determination coming across her face.
Absolutely. Every pony knows that when you get scars, there's some awesome story behind it. So what were you doing? Some kind of weird, wicked trick? Freak training accident? Some kind of epic battle?
He slowly shook his head in silence. No. Twilight's ears flattened at the conversation, her own frustration growing. She was curious and wanted to hear his explanation. Well, what did happen? He pursed his lips for a moment as the memories washed through his mind, bringing with them old, dark thoughts. He slowly turned his gaze to all of them, looking into their eyes, his own looking as though he were apologizing without words for what he was about to say. They are for when I tried to take my own life.